people always ask me, they say, Nick, what are your favorite plugins? And while I got a lot that I like to use, and I got a video on my favorite free ones, there's one in particular that I think stands out above all the rest in terms of value, features, and the developers behind it. And that is Motion-3 by Mt. Mograph. So let's take a look at what makes this tool so great. Come on! Before we dive into the video, please know that this is not an ad or paid for by Mt. Mograph. I wanted to make this video because I've been using Motion for several years, and it's a wonderful tool that I wanted to share. In fact, I bought a lifetime license when it was Motion-2, so I've been getting free updates for years now. As you can probably guess, though, I reached out to Matt from Mt. Mograph when I was making this video, and he was generous enough to hook us up with a discount code NICK for 15% off all Mt. Mograph tools, and it is also an affiliate link. So if you use the link to buy a plugin, then you save money and I get money. And that's just how business works, baby. We all win. But enough chit chat. Let's take a look at Motion-3. So technically, Motion is an extension, which you can find under Window Extensions. And what's great about that is they can push updates to you automatically. And there's a lot of updates, which is great. So this is the kind of default interface that you'll see when you open it up. And right off the bat, we have all these easing sliders. So we can do, ease out. We can ease both keyframes. We can ease in. There's hold keyframes. We can get crazy with this kind of graph editor thing. And if you have easings that you really like, you can save them as presets, and then you can build your own library of them if you use them a lot. There is anchor point tools, so you can move anchor points around. You can easily rename layers here. You can rename your composition to be whatever you want. There are all these presets, so you can change around your composition size, the frames per second, the durations, and you can save these as presets too. You could even resize the comp duration like this, which I don't know why you'd want to do that way, but you can. So there's so much functionality on this one little page here. And if this is, too crowded for you, you can go into this interface menu and you can turn off stuff. So let's say you don't want to have the curve graph there. You could just uncheck that. And when you go back, then it's a little bit more cleaned up. And then up here, we have what's called focus. So let's open up my focus comp and take a look at what this is. So focus is especially good if you have really crazy compositions and you need to isolate. So let's say I have these shapes that animate on and this text, and I want to just focus on these dots. So I'm going to grab these dots and I'm going to say focus. And now I'm just looking at these, and it didn't make a pre-comp or anything. And maybe I'll say I want to make these into, a focus group. I'll call these shapes. Now I have these as a group here, and I can turn these on and off. I can lock these layers, shy them, whatever. I'm going to go back to bring everything back, and I can also do the same thing with these text. Focus these. I'm going to make these into a group too, to call this text. So now I have two groups, and I can kind of have this control with them. I can turn the text on and off. I can turn the shapes on and off. I can easily choose to lock either one of these groups or shy them. I can grab all those layers, etc. So this can be a really super handy tool if you have really complicated compositions and you want kind of to isolate specific groups of layers that you designate. So if you've been using After Effects for a long time, you know how annoying managing color can be. Well, if you click this little color icon, there is an amazing color manager. So you can import color palettes, you can create color palettes, and let's take a look at this. So I have a color palette in here, and you can easily change color of things. Here are a bunch of items. You can change their hues and saturations and blah, 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 and their transparencies. You can change the background colors easily. You can color pick things. You can grab a whole bunch of items and change them together. And this, to me, once again, alone could be its own paid plugin, but it's not. It's just another little bonus item. Now it's time to get into the real meat of functionality in Motion. You can see here I have a bunch of my favorited tools here, but this is just a glimpse at it. Here's all the tools. So let's take a look at these. We're going to go in alphabetical order here, starting with Animo. So Animo is a very hard to wrap your head around one. We're going to use a very basic example. I have all these, this really basic animation like this. I'm going to select all these properties, click Animo, let's do shapes, click go, and it's going to create this little Animo system here. So basically what it did is it kind of has this retimable controller now that controls everything. So I could retime everything, all these properties, and maybe, you know, ease them together. So now everything is easing, and I have controls here, like I can just choose to loop these and maybe ping pong it, right? So I'm having now global control over all of those properties, but they're not pre-comped. So I could go in here and I could change stuff in these properties, yet somehow this is still controlling all of those together. I have no idea how this is working, but you can start to do the most insane stuff because you can retime these in the craziest way and start to have the most mind-bending animations. So it's really hard to kind of wrap your head around. Maybe this is a really bad example. So let me know if this does not make sense and we can dive deeper into this. On to the next one. So blend basically smooths out keyframes. So this is my original animation. I'm going to add blend to it. And then if you see I enable it and then crank up the smoothness, it's going to basically kind of interpolate between that. I'm going to really crank it up so you can really see. And it'll basically just make a smooth line between them. Yeah, there you go. Break is pretty straightforward. You can break apart shapes from Illustrator into shapes. You can also break apart vector shapes in After Effects into multiple layers. Burst is really good for making stuff like this. Accents, impacts, etc. You just click burst and it generates a layer that looks like this, and then you have control over the position, the number of copies, distance from center, rotations, revolutions, the colors, width, and stuff like that. Nice. Clone allows you to clone keyframes with one click. So if you highlight all your keyframes and then click the clone button, it's going to duplicate the keyframes. And if you alt click it or option click it, where is it? Where does the button go? Then it reverses the keyframes. Very handy. With cloth, you can easily generate some cloth and stuff like that. So with my layer selected, I'm going to add some puppet pins onto this, and the order you do them matters, I believe. So I'm going to go from top to bottom here, and then I'm going to click cloth and do a system name. I'll write cloth. And here we go. So I'm just going to add on a dynamics here, which is basically a wiggle. We're going to get into that later. And there we go. We have some kind of just cloth waving around. And you know, you could attach this to like a head if you wanted this to be hair, and we could play around with stuff. You know, we could add a color to this, and you can see these are affecting some kind of color system that's happening. And you have all these things here. You could parent this to another layer if you wanted this to like be to a flag or attached to a head for hair, but we're not going to get too deep into this. Delay. So we have this animation, these shapes going back and forth, and we want to change up, stagger these, but maybe we're worried our client isn't going to like the stagger of this stuff. We don't want to do too much manual work. So let's just add a delay system to these, which is going to give us control of this stuff without having to go in and manually move around the keyframes. So let's open up our delay here, if it's enabled, and now we can just easily change how much delay is in all of these. We could put it at 0, and 0 is normal, no delay, or we can really kind of crank this stuff up and have a lot of delay. And the really cool part about this is we can keyframe this. So have no delay for a little bit, and then it animates up and has some delay, and then has no delay again, and have some weird effects like that. There's stuff like drag, and we can change the color of these things to also random things are happening with the color. And this might take so much manual effort to do things like this, but it's just a few clicks with delay. Dynamics is basically a really nice smart wiggle. So let's put it on our position property. Boom. Now we're wiggling around the position. We can change the frequency. Maybe we want to happen 2 times per second and a lot less in space. We can change the seed. Maybe we want this to be hold keyframe, so it's just boop, boop, boop around. We can enable separation, so we can say we only want it to happen on one axis. So it's only going to happen up and down. And this is going to just be a really easy way to have a controlled wiggle. Echo is probably going to be self-explanatory, but we can add an echo with a number of copies. So let's say we want to add 31 copies to this. So now when this animates, you can see it's adding 31 repeated shapes to this. But the cool thing is we have a lot of control, like everything else in this. We can add a delay to this. We can choose how much we want to delay this. Maybe we want to change the color of these so it makes a nice rainbow. We can cycle through these colors. And we have more control over if we want to change just the position more or the rotation more, or maybe we want to add a dynamics, aka a wiggle to these. So you can do some really bizarre stuff with this, and you can, of course, obviously combine echo with any of the other things. Moving on. Excite is one of my most used tools here. It's just going to really help you with overshoot. So here I just have a scale up with no easing. So if you apply this to a linear keyframe, you're going to get some overshoot. And I think this is a little much here. It's too, so let's open up the property and maybe bring these all down. There we go. We have a much nicer overshoot. Falloff is an interesting tool that lets you interact with a bunch of layers with a controller layer. So let's see what that means. So let's grab all of these layers and let's say we want to interact with their opacity. So I'm going to grab all of these opacities here. Grab, 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 grab. And let's click Falloff. And now if we bring down all of these opacities, we can move around this Falloff. And whenever this layer overlaps any of the other layers, these opacities are going to drop down. And we could do this with any property you can think of pretty much. You can make their scales get bigger, they could rotate, anything. And this controller layer could be parented to something else like a cursor or whatever. Flips things horizontally and vertically. I don't think I really have to go into much more detail than that. Grab is one of the most unexpectedly useful things So let's say I want to grab all of the same properties of a bunch of layers. Well, normally what you have to do is you have to select all these layers, click R like I did before, and manually click every single one. And that can be really annoying. With grab, select them all, click one layer, and then click grab. And now all the rotations are selected. And this also works with pretty much anything you can think of. This can be very useful if you have hundreds of layers on something. Jump. Also something I use a ton. I have this ball. It's going to hit an impact, and I need this to bounce. So I'll grab these keyframe, and I'll click jump. And now it's going to jump. And I think that jump is way too high. I don't know why it's like that right off the bat, but let's open up the properties. We'll bring the stretch down a little bit. The gravity can stay the same. It'll bring the jumps to 2. And let's see what happens. I think it's still a little bit high, but you get the idea. Null, also one of my most used tools. You can just make null objects with a centered anchor point. I absolutely have come to hate null objects with a center point on the corner. I hate them now. I love null objects with the center point in the middle. And also with this, if you have a layer and you click null, it will automatically parent your shape to a null object with a centered anchor point, which is very nice and convenient. Orbit is nothing mind-blowing. Click orbit on your layer that you want to orbit, select the target. In my case is the big planet. And now you have a layer that's going to orbit around it, and you can just change little things like the speed, the distance, and the calibration. PinPlus. If you have puppet pins, it will make null objects where all the puppet pins are. I don't use puppet pins pretty much ever, but if I did, I guess this is helpful. Maybe you will find this helpful, but I don't really use puppet pins to know if I guess this is a really good thing. Someone let me know. Could be. Renamer is a little tool that can help you rename all your layers. So let's say I want to rename everything shape with a prefix of 00 and a little separator, and that shows you pretty much how it's going to look. And I can just go ahead and do that. And there you go. It's useful if you have a disorganized composition. And then reverse will take all of your layers in an order and reverse them. This is another thing that I have favorited because I often do not like the way that After Effects orders my layers natively. I think it does it backwards, so I like to reverse them constantly. And while we're on organization, there is sort, which will sort all of your compositions. If you have a messy composition, this is extremely good too. So it's going to basically take all of your stuff and organize it according to these. And then you click sort, and boom, cleans it up like this. And this is extremely good if you maybe open up someone else's file and it's a mess and you just want to clean it up, grab all the comps, all the images, everything like that. I'm going to undo it though because I liked my structure how it was. Spin, you can probably guess what this does. It makes stuff spin. With little controls, you can reverse it. You can change the calibration. You can change the amount of spins per second. Just a little nice convenient thing to do. And then stare, when you click it, makes one item stare at another item. So my triangle is going to stare at my square. So now if I move my square around, the triangle is going to stare at it. Beautiful. Text break. Let's say you have a text block and you want these all to be masks. Text break, you can break either into words or into letters. Let's break this into letters. Now every single one of these is a shape. Woohoo! Beautiful. Texture is one I think a lot of people are going to find pretty awesome. So I have this shape going back and forth. Let's apply a texture to it. There's this whole library in here. Let's find one that I think is nice. Look at this brown paper bag. That's great. So I just applied this texture to here. And off the bat, I don't really like the way this looks. It's just stationary. The shape's moving through it. And I want this to maybe be, let's say, multiplied on top. So let's do that. And I think this should be moving with it. So let's say we want to enable that with it, and there's a nice little, that delay is with it, but I don't really like the delay. So let's say 0 for that. Now it's moving with the shape. We can also do things like, though, we can add that nice trendy little wiggle that's happening. So let's say we can add that wiggle, but I want it to be kind of blockier. And now we have this shaky little texture that's happening on top. And look at that. We can change the amount that this happens. Maybe we want it to be really fast. You know, I can just add, maybe I want to add a tint to this or something. I mean, look, this didn't even put any layers in here except for this one. I don't know how it does it. It's freaking magic. Trace. I have this triangle blasting across the screen here. Let's add a little something extra to this. I'm going to click trace. Whoa, look, it adds a little trail to this that's like affected by gravity. Pretty cool. Trim is pretty basic. You click it and it adds a trim paths, which then just takes a step or two out of adding trim paths to your animations. Vector. Let's say we have all these shapes and we want to connect them with a line. Well, just click vector. You can create a system name. I'll call this a vector. And we have all these options. You know, you have one where they kind of loosely connect to each other. They all connect on an outline, or they connect, each one connects to each other. I'm going to do that one because I think it's the coolest. Now we have these lines that all generate, and we can move these shapes around and they're going to stay connected. And we can actually go into the vector here and we can animate these. You can animate the length, you can animate them from point to point, their thicknesses, their colors, stuff like that. Let's show Vignette. Pretty simple, it makes a vignette, but this is much easier than making a vignette yourself. And then you have all these controls like the feathering, the scale, the intensity. Very nice. And then finally, for the tools, we have warp. So I have this kind of lava lamp look, and I want these things to be blobbier. So I'm going to select them and click warp. And now we have this nice warpiness to them. And we can easily change their choke mat, their softness, etc. And then finally, I thought I would save my favorite one for last. It's called trash, and it puts your animation in the trash. Just kidding. It just deletes the effect that you put on. So if I went back to blend, and it's where I have my animation smoothed out, and if I click trash, it will delete the effect off the keyframes. I had already thought that Motion was such a good value since I've been using it for years now, but I didn't truly understand most of these tools until I sat down to make this video. And I was kind of mind blown when I was going through this and learning about what all of these can actually do. So I guess let me know if you guys want me to kind of go through more video walkthrough tutorial/reviews of tools like this. Leave a comment if you'd like this and want to see more, or if you didn't like it, let me know that too. Yeah, let me know your thoughts. See ya.